The morning sun cast long shadows across the green fields of Kepler 442b. Thylorian farmers moved slowly through the crops, their six-fingered hands gentle as they checked each plant. These peaceful beings had spent hundreds of years growing the most valuable medicines in the galaxy. Their world was quiet, safe, and beautiful. Elder Xynthia stood on the hill overlooking the main settlement. Her purple skin showed the deep lines of age, and her large eyes held the wisdom of someone who had lived through many seasons. The Thylorians were proud of their work. Every year they sent healing plants to dozens of worlds across the galaxy. Their medicines had saved millions of lives. The first sign of trouble came from the orbital station. Communications Officer Kelthera's voice crackled through the emergency speakers placed throughout the settlement. Elder Xynthia, please come to the command center immediately. We have detected something in deep space. Xynthia walked quickly to the small building that served as their contact point with the outside galaxy. The Thylorians were not a military people. They had no weapons, no warships, no armies. They had never needed them. For 300 years, they had lived in peace. Inside the command center, Kelthera pointed at the main screen. Long-range sensors show a large mass moving toward our system. The computer identifies it as a void swarm. The words sent cold fear through Xynthia's body. Every species in the galaxy knew about the void swarms. They were creatures of nightmare, born in the dark, spaces between stars. The swarms consumed everything organic they found. Planets, plants, animals, people. Nothing survived when the swarm arrived. How long do we have? Xynthia asked. 6 days, maybe 7, Kelthera replied. The swarm is moving fast. Our scanners show it's huge, bigger than any recorded before. Xynthia looked around the room at the other Thylorians. They were scientists, farmers, healers. None of them knew how to fight. Send emergency messages to all our trading partners. Tell them we need help. Send them everything. Our location, the threat, and how many of us live here. Kelthera's fingers moved quickly over the controls. Message sent to the Zephyrian Empire, the Crystalline Confederacy, the Aquatic Dominion, and the Ethereal Collective. Also sending to smaller allies, the Metal Workers Union, the Gas Giant Federation, and the Peaceful Traders Alliance. The first response came within hours. The Zephyrian Empire had been buying Thylorian medicine for over a century. Their military was strong, their ships fast. Surely they would help. The message was short and cold. Imperial Command has reviewed your request. Strategic analysis shows no vital interests in your sector. The Empire cannot commit resources to this action. We suggest immediate evacuation if possible. Xynthia stared at the screen. No vital interests? We've been healing their soldiers for 100 years. More responses came throughout the day. Each one brought the same crushing disappointment. The Crystalline Confederacy sent their regrets but explained they were dealing with their own border conflicts. The Aquatic Dominion said their ships were not designed for this type of combat. The Ethereal Collective simply stated that the greater good requires difficult choices. By evening, every major power in the galaxy had refused to help. Some offered to take a few Thylorian refugees, but most made it clear they wanted nothing to do with fighting a void swarm. Young Morven, barely an adult by Thylorian standards, spoke what everyone was thinking. Why won't they help us? We've helped all of them. When the crystalline plague spread through their worlds, who created the cure? When Zephyrian children were dying from the red fever, who worked day and night to save them? Elder Xynthia had no answer. She had lived long enough to understand that gratitude often died when convenience was threatened. Keep sending messages, she told Kelthera. Send them to everyone, maybe someone will answer. The second day brought more refusals. Smaller governments apologized but claimed they lacked the military strength to fight a swarm. Even species they had helped just months ago turned away. The metal workers said their ships were needed to defend their own factories. The Gas Giant Federation claimed they had already moved their fleets to protect more valuable worlds. On the third day, panic began to spread through the settlements. Thylorian families gathered in the town centers, holding their children close. The evacuation, Ships offered by various governments could only take a few thousand people. Nearly 2 million Thylorians lived on the planet. We could run, suggested Kelthera during the evening meeting. Load everyone onto transport ships and flee to the outer rim. And go where? Xynthia asked. We are farmers, not wanderers. This is our home. Our ancestors are buried in this soil. Our medicines grow in these fields. If we leave, we lose everything that makes us who we are. That night, Xynthia walked through the settlement. Thylorian families sat outside their homes, looking up at the stars. Children asked their parents why the friendly aliens wouldn't help them. Parents struggled to explain that friendship often had limits. The fourth day brought news that made everything worse. The void swarm had accelerated. It would arrive in 3 days, not 4. Long-range scans showed its true size, over 10,000. Biomechanical ships, each one capable of stripping the life from an entire continent. Send one more message, Xynthia told Kelthera. Send it on all frequencies to every species we can reach. Tell them what we face. Tell them that children will die. Tell them that if they won't help us fight, at least remember that we existed. Kelthera typed the message with tears running down her face. Message sent to all known civilizations. Over 300 species will receive this transmission. The responses came quickly. Most were the same polite refusals they had already received. A few new species sent their sympathy, but claimed they were too far away to help in time. One message came from a group of pirates who offered to evacuate Thylorian children for a massive payment in rare metals. By the 5th day, the void swarm was close enough to see with optical telescopes. It looked like a dark cloud spreading across the stars, blocking out the light. The biomechanical ships moved in perfect formation, guided by a single hungry mind that thought only of consumption. Families began gathering in the temples, praying to their ancient gods for a miracle. The evacuation ships arrived from various governments, but they could only take the youngest children and the most essential scientists. Parents made heartbreaking choices about which children to save. Elder Xynthia stood again on her hill, watching the ships launch into space carrying a few thousand lucky survivors. Below her, nearly 2 million Thylorians prepared to face their end with dignity. They were a gentle people who had spent their lives healing others. Now they would die because no one cared enough to save them. The long-range sensors showed the swarm would arrive in 18 hours. Kelthera had stopped checking for new messages. Everyone who might help had already refused. As the sun set on what might be their last day, Xynthia made peace with their fate. They had lived good lives. They had helped countless others. If this was how their story ended, at least they could face it with honor. But deep in space, far beyond their sensors' reach, one last message was racing toward a small ship in an unknown sector. A ship crewed by a species that no one had ever heard of. A species that was about to change everything. The exploration ship Defiant Hope drifted silently through space, far from any major trade routes. Captain Sarah Chen sat in her command chair, reading reports from the science team. They had been mapping this sector for 3 months, looking for new worlds that might support human colonies. Captain, called Communications Officer Lisa Park from her station. I'm picking up a distress signal. It's weak, but it's definitely a call for help. Chen straightened in her chair. Put it on. The main screen. The image that appeared showed a being unlike any human had ever seen. Purple skin, large dark eyes, and 6-fingered hands. The creature spoke in a language the computer had never heard before. But the universal translator worked quickly to decode the words. This is Elder Xynthia of the Thylorian people on Kepler 442b. We face extinction from a void swarm. All our allies have abandoned us. If anyone receives this message, please remember that we tried to help others. We ask only that our children might somehow survive. The bridge fell silent. Chief Engineer Marcus Rodriguez leaned forward from his station. Did she say Thylorians? I know that name. From where? Chen asked. Marcus's face was grim. Medical databases. When my daughter Maria was dying from Keller's disease, the doctors said there was a cure. Some kind of plant medicine made by a species called Thylorians, but we couldn't get it. No one knew how to contact them. Science Officer Dr. James Wu pulled up his charts. Kepler 442b is 4 days away at maximum jump speed. But Captain, we're not a military vessel. We have basic shields. And light weapons, what they're describing. A void swarm, that's something that destroys entire fleets. Chen stood and walked to the view screen. The aliens, Cynthia's face showed the calm acceptance of someone facing death. But behind her, Chen could see other figures, smaller ones, children. How many ships do we have in this sector? She asked. Just us, replied Lieutenant Barnes from the navigation station. The nearest military vessels are weeks away. And how many people live on that planet? Dr. Wu checked his readings. The signal mentions 2 million inhabitants. Chen closed her eyes. She thought about her own daughter back on Earth safe in school. She thought about Marcus's Maria, who had died because medicine existed but couldn't reach her in time. She thought about the principles that had guided humanity since they first reached the stars. Send a message to Earth Command, she ordered. Inform them of the situation and our intentions. What intentions? Asked Dr. Wu. We're going to help them. The bridge erupted in surprised voices. Marcus was the first to speak clearly. Captain, with respect, we can't fight a void swarm. We'll just be throwing our lives away. Chen turned to face her crew. Maybe. But I've read the reports about these swarms. They don't just kill. They consume everything. Every plant, every animal, every trace of life. An entire species will disappear forever, and no one cares enough to try stopping it. She looked around at her officers. I know we're explorers, not soldiers. I know the odds are impossible, but we took an oath when we joined Starfleet. We swore to help those in need regardless of species or politics. Lieutenant Barnes spoke up. Earth Command will order us to stay away. Then we better be out of communication range when that order comes, Chen replied. Set course for Kepler 442b, maximum speed. The next few hours were busy as the crew prepared for what might be their last mission. Dr. Wu worked with the medical team to study everything they could find about Thylorian biology. If they survived the first contact, they wanted to be able to help any wounded. Marcus spent his time in engineering, pushing the engines harder than they were designed to go. He also worked on modifications to their few weapons. The Defiant Hope carried mining lasers and survey torpedoes. Not much against a space monster, but better than nothing. Lisa Park kept trying to contact the Thylorians, but the distance was still too great. She also monitored for any response from Earth Command. So far, silence on both fronts. On the second day, Earth Command finally responded. Admiral Harrison's face appeared on the screen, his expression angry. Captain Chen, you are ordered to maintain your current position and await further instructions. Under no circumstances are you to engage with hostile alien forces. Chen looked at the message timestamp. It had taken 18 hours to reach them, which meant Earth was now 19 hours behind their current position. Lisa, send a reply. Tell them we're experiencing communication difficulties due to solar interference. But Captain, we're not. Solar interference, Chen repeated firmly. Dr. Wu approached her after the transmission ended. Sarah, I've been studying the data about void swarms. They're not just animals, they're a hive mind. One giant creature made up of thousands of ships. Our weapons might scratch their paint, but we can't destroy something that size. Then we don't fight the whole swarm, Chen said. We fight smart. What do we know about planets with heavy vegetation? Marcus overheard from his engineering station. Thick atmosphere, lots of organic compounds. Plants produce toxins for defense, some of them pretty nasty. Chen smiled for the first time in days. Exactly. The Thylorians are farmers and healers. They know plants better than anyone. If we can help them weaponize their own ecosystem. It's still suicide, Dr. Wu pointed out. Maybe, but it's suicide with purpose. Chen looked around the bridge at her crew of 200 souls. Anyone who wants to leave can take a shuttle and head for the nearest starbase. No shame in that. This isn't what you signed up for. No one moved. Lieutenant Barnes spoke for everyone. Where you go, we go, Captain. On the third day, they finally got close enough to communicate with the Thylorians. Cynthia's face appeared on their screen, showing surprise and confusion. Unknown vessel, please identify yourself. Are you with one of the evacuation fleets? This is Captain Sarah Chen of the human ship Defiant Hope. We received your distress call and we're here to help. Cynthia's large eyes blinked slowly. Human? I do not know this species. Are you allies of the Zephyrians or Crystallines? We're not allies of anyone in this sector, Chen replied. We heard you needed help, so we came. But why? What do you gain from this? Chen thought about how to explain human nature to an alien. We don't gain anything, we help because it's right. Cynthia was quiet for a long moment. You said one ship. How many ships do you have coming? Just us. One ship? Against a void swarm? Cynthia's voice showed disbelief. Do you understand what you face? We understand, Chen said. We're not here to win an impossible battle. We're here to make sure you don't face it alone. Tears ran down Cynthia's purple cheeks. After days of rejection and abandonment, someone had come. It didn't matter that it was just one ship from an unknown species. Someone had answered their call. How can we help you help us? Cynthia asked. Chen leaned forward. Tell us everything you know about your planet's ecosystem. We're going to turn your world into the biggest trap the galaxy has ever seen. As the Defiant Hope entered orbit around Kepler 442b, long-range sensors detected the approaching void swarm. 6 hours until contact. 1 human ship and 2 million peaceful farmers against the most terrifying force in the galaxy. The impossible had begun. The void swarm emerged from hyperspace like a nightmare made real. Thousands of biomechanical ships blotted out the stars, their dark hulls pulsing with veins of sickly green light. Each ship was alive, part of a single hungry consciousness that had devoured entire star systems. Captain Chen watched from the bridge of the Defiant Hope as the massive fleet approached Kepler 442b. Her crew had worked for 6 hours straight, helping the Thylorians prepare their desperate plan. How many ships? She asked. Lieutenant Barnes checked his sensors. Over 8,000 individual vessels. The largest ones are bigger than space stations. Captain, the biomass readings are off the charts. Down on the planet, Elder Cynthia coordinated the largest agricultural project in Thylorian history. Working with the humans' advice, her people had spent the last hours processing their medicinal plants into concentrated toxins. Every field, every forest, every garden now contained deadly traps. The spore dispersal systems are ready, reported Kelthera from the Planetary Command Center. Dr. Wu's chemical formulas have made our defensive compounds 10 times more potent. Dr. Wu's voice came over the communication link from the human ship. Remember, the toxins won't kill the swarm ships, but they'll disrupt their bioneural networks. If we can confuse their hive mind, even for a few minutes, we might have a chance. Marcus had been working on the planet's surface, helping Thylorian engineers set up explosive charges in the mining tunnels. Captain, we've got surprises buried in every major underground system. If we can get the swarm to land ground forces, we can give them a very warm welcome. The first swarm ships entered the atmosphere like falling meteors. They were massive creatures of living metal and flesh, their surfaces covered in feeding tentacles and sensor organs. The lead ships landed in the largest agricultural zones and immediately began consuming the crops. Now, Chen ordered. Across the planet, hidden dispensers released clouds of toxic spores into the air. The swarm ships breathed in the contaminated atmosphere, and their coordinated movements became confused and erratic. Some ships collided with others. Many simply stopped moving as their nervous systems overloaded. It's working, Cynthia called, from the surface. The smaller ships are falling out of formation, but the celebration was short-lived. The swarm's hive mind adapted quickly, and the larger ships began filtering their atmosphere intake. Worse, they started burning the forests to clear away the toxin sources. Phase 2, Chen announced. Marcus, light them up. Underground explosions rocked the planet as mining charges detonated beneath the landed swarm ships. Entire formations of bioships fell into newly created chasms. But for every ship that fell, 10 more took its place. From orbit, Chen could see the true scope of what they faced. The swarm was landing thousands of ships across the planet. Even their most optimistic plans had only accounted for hundreds. "Captain," Dr. Wu called from his station, "the atmospheric processors on the swarm ships are working faster than we expected. They're stripping oxygen from the air and replacing it with their preferred mix. At this rate, the Thylorians will suffocate within hours." Chen made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "All hands prepare for atmospheric entry. We're taking the fight to the surface." "Captain, the ship's not designed for atmosphere combat," Marcus protested from engineering. "Then we better make it work," Chen replied. "Because if we stay in orbit, we're just watching them die slowly instead of quickly." The Defiant Hope descended through the burning atmosphere, its hull heating up as it plunged toward the largest concentration of swarm ships. Chen had ordered all non-essential crew to the escape pods, but only 30 people had agreed to leave. The rest stayed at their posts. They came down shooting. The ship's mining lasers, never designed for combat, tore into the swarm vessels with desperate intensity. The survey torpedoes, loaded with improvised explosive compounds, created massive fireballs when they hit the bioship's sensitive nerve clusters. For 20 minutes, the Defiant Hope fought like a cornered animal. They destroyed dozens of smaller swarm ships and damaged several large ones. But the cost was terrible. The ship's shields failed first, then the hull began taking direct hits from the swarm's bioweapons. "Hull breach on decks 4 through 7, reported Lieutenant Barnes, blood running from a head wound. "We've lost main power to weapons." Marcus's voice came over the intercom from engineering. "Captain, I can give you one more big shot, but it'll mean overloading the reactor core." Chen understood what he was offering. "Marcus, no. We'll find another way." "There is no other way," Marcus replied calmly. "And anyway, I promised Maria I'd do something that mattered. This matters." Before Chen could stop him, Marcus began the overload sequence. "Tell my daughter her papa helped save some kids today." The explosion lit up the sky like a second sun. Marcus had piloted the Defiant Hope directly into the largest swarm vessel, turning their ship into a massive bomb. The chain reaction destroyed not just the primary bioship, but dozens of others in the formation. The surviving crew members found themselves scattered across the planet's surface in escape pods. Only 147 humans remained alive, scattered among 2 million Thylorians. But something impossible had happened. The swarm was retreating. Dr. Wu, nursing a broken arm, analyzed the readings from his damaged equipment. "The hive mind is confused. We destroyed their command ship, and now the individual vessels can't coordinate properly." Elder Xynthia helped Chen out of her crashed pod. "Your friend's sacrifice has given us time, but not victory. There are still thousands of swarm ships in orbit." Chen looked up at the sky, where the biomechanical monsters circled like vultures. Her ship was gone, her crew dead or scattered, and the enemy was just regrouping. But the Thylorians were still alive. "Then, we make them pay for every hour," she said. "We taught them that some species fight back. Now we teach them that some species never give up." Over the next 3 days, the mixed force of humans and Thylorians waged guerrilla warfare against the swarm. They used the planet's geography against the invaders, turning every forest into a maze of traps and every mountain into a fortress. The Thylorians, peaceful by nature, learned to fight with a determination that surprised even themselves. They had been abandoned by every ally they'd trusted, but these strange humans had given their lives to defend people they'd never met. The swarm, meanwhile, faced something it had never encountered before. Usually, organic species either fled or died quickly. These defenders adapted, learned, and refused to surrender. Every victory cost the swarm more than they had expected. On the 3rd day, something unexpected happened. Ships began appearing in the outer system. Not more swarm vessels, but rescue fleets from across the galaxy. The news of humanity's sacrifice had spread, and it had shamed other species into action. The Zephyrian Empire arrived first, their proud warships bristling with weapons. Behind them came the Crystalline Confederacy, the Aquatic Dominion, and dozens of smaller fleets. Even some civilian vessels had come loaded with relief supplies. The combined fleet fell upon the weakened swarm with righteous fury. The bioships, already disorganized from their ground combat losses, broke formation and fled into hyperspace. As the last swarm vessel disappeared, Chen stood with Xynthia on a hill overlooking the damaged but living world below. The cost had been terrible. Thousands of Thylorians dead, beautiful cities burned, and 53 humans who would never see home again. "Why did your people do this?" Xynthia asked. "You gained nothing. You lost everything." Chen thought about Marcus, about her crew, about the choice that had brought them here. "We gained something you can't measure in credits or territory. We gained the knowledge that we did the right thing." Around them, rescue ships landed to help with the recovery. The galaxy's most powerful civilizations were rushing to help repair the damage they had initially ignored. The humans had shown them something they had forgotten, that some things mattered more than profit or politics. As Chen watched the relief efforts begin, she realized that 200 humans and one broken-down exploration ship had just changed the course of galactic history. Not through superior weapons or technology, but through the simple decision to help when help was needed. The question now was whether the rest of the galaxy had learned the lesson. The news traveled faster than any starship. Within days, every communication network in the galaxy carried the same incredible story. A species called humans, unknown, technologically inferior, politically insignificant, had sacrificed themselves to save strangers. On the crystal cities of the Confederacy, young citizens gathered in the public squares to watch recordings of the battle. They saw the Defiant Hope's final moments, Marcus Rodriguez's last words echoing across space. "Tell my daughter her papa helped save some kids today." Zara Ka, a young crystalline barely past her maturity cycle, watched the footage with tears crystallizing on her translucent cheeks. She turned to her friend Velto. "We could have helped them. Our fleet was only 6 days away." "The council said it wasn't strategic," Velto replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "Strategic?" Zara Ka's voice cracked with emotion. "Children were going to die, and we talked about strategy." Similar conversations happened across the galaxy. In the floating cities of the Aquatic Dominion, young amphibians questioned their elders' wisdom. In the vast hive complexes of the ethereal collective, individual consciousness began to emerge from the group mind as citizens asked uncomfortable questions. Admiral Thex Prime of the Zephyrian Empire stood before the Senate, his golden feathers dulled with shame. "Senators, we must address what happened at Kepler 442b." The Senate chamber was unusually quiet. These proud warriors, conquerors of a dozen systems, had been shown up by explorers with mining equipment. The humans lost 53 lives saving the Thylorians. Thex Prime continued. "In doing so, they accomplished what our entire battle fleet could have achieved with minimal losses. But more than that, they showed the galaxy what we have become." Senator Klex Major rose from his seat. "Are you suggesting we should have risked Zephyrian lives for aliens?" "I'm suggesting that we once stood for something more than profit margins and territorial expansion," Thex Prime replied. "When did we stop being warriors and become accountants?" The debate that followed would reshape Zephyrian society. For the first time in centuries, young Zephyrians began questioning the path their civilization had chosen. Military academies reported record enrollment from citizens who wanted to serve a higher purpose than conquest. But the strongest reaction came from an unexpected source. On Earth, the human homeworld, the government found itself dealing with a crisis it had never imagined. Admiral Harrison sat in his office reading reports from across human space. Every human colony, every space station, every ship in the fleet was asking the same question. Why had Earth Command ordered Captain Chen not to help? "Sir," his aide announced, "there are protests outside the building. They're demanding to know why we tried to stop the Defiant Hope." Harrison looked out his window at the crowd below. Signs reading, "We stand with Chen and no one left behind," filled the plaza. The families of the Defiant Hope's crew were there, but so were thousands of other citizens. The political implications were staggering. Captain Chen had disobeyed direct orders, but she had become the most popular human in the galaxy. Her surviving crew members were being hailed as heroes. Meanwhile, Earth Command looked like cowards who had tried to prevent a rescue mission. "Get me a link to Admiral Chen," Harrison ordered. Sarah Chen's face appeared on the screen, transmitted from the temporary shelter on Kepler 442b, where she was helping coordinate relief efforts. She looked exhausted, but determined. "Admiral Harrison," she said formally. "I assume you're calling to place me under arrest." "Actually, no. I'm calling to offer you a promotion. Earth Command wants to make you head of our new Humanitarian Response Division." Chen's laugh was bitter. "You want to give me a reward for disobeying orders? Sarah, the entire human population is demanding to know why we didn't authorize your mission. 3 colonies have threatened to declare independence unless we change our policies. We need to show that Earth Command stands behind the actions of the Defiant Hope. And what about the next time someone needs help and it's not convenient for Earth politics?" Harrison was quiet for a moment. "There won't be a next time like this. The galaxy has changed, Sarah, and humanity has to change with it." The changes went far beyond human space. On the Thylorian homeworld, Elder Xynthia found herself at the center of a transformation she had never expected. "Elder, we have requests for diplomatic meetings from over 200 species," Kelthera reported. "They all want to establish formal relations." Xynthia looked out at the bustling spaceport that had been built where the emergency shelters once stood. Ships from dozens of civilizations brought aid, technology, and trade offers. The Thylorians, once isolated farmers, had become one of the most influential species in the galaxy. "What kind of meetings?" Xynthia asked. "Most want to join the Alliance of Conscience. It's what they're calling the coalition that formed to defend us." The Alliance of Conscience had begun as an informal group of species that felt guilty about their initial refusal to help, but it had quickly grown into something larger, a new political movement based on the idea that moral obligations mattered more than strategic interests. Dr. Wu, now permanently stationed on Kepler 402b as Earth's first ambassador to the Thylorians, brought the latest reports to Xynthia's office. "The philosophical impact is extraordinary," he explained. "Universities across the galaxy are rewriting their ethics courses. The human doctrine, the idea that helping others is always the right choice, is being taught in schools on hundreds of worlds. And the practical effects? 3 border conflicts have been resolved through mediation instead of warfare. The Traders Guild has established new rules about helping ships in distress. Most importantly, there are now rapid response fleets stationed throughout the galaxy, ready to help any species that faces extinction-level threats." Xynthia smiled. "Marcus Rodriguez saved more than just our children. He saved something in the galaxy's soul." The memorial service for the Defiant Hope's crew became a galactic event. Representatives from every major civilization attended, along with thousands of ordinary citizens from species across the stars. Captain Chen spoke at the ceremony, standing before a simple monument listing the 53 names of those who had died. "My crew didn't set out to change the galaxy," she said. "They just saw people who needed help and decided to do something about it. In the end, that's all any of us can do. See a problem and choose to be part of the solution." In the audience, young beings from dozens of species listened to her words. Many would go on to join the new humanitarian fleets. Others would become diplomats, working to prevent conflicts before they started. Some would become teachers, spreading the message that cooperation was stronger than competition. But the most important audience wasn't in the crowd at all. Deep in space, monitoring stations detected something unprecedented. Other void swarms, hearing about the defeat at Kepler 442b, were changing their behavior. The news that organic species could organize effective resistance had made them more cautious, more willing to avoid populated systems. The galaxy was learning that standing up to bullies worked, even when the bullies were cosmic horrors. On Earth, Maria Rodriguez, now grown and working as a doctor, received a special package. It contained seeds from Thylorian healing plants, the same species that could have saved her when she was young. With them came a message from Elder Xynthia. "Your father gave his life so that other children might live. These seeds will help Earth's children for generations to come. His sacrifice grows into healing. Maria planted the first seed in her hospital's garden, where it would grow into a tree that would provide medicine for countless patients. Like her father's sacrifice, it was a gift that would keep giving long after the giver was gone. The galaxy had learned a lesson written in sacrifice and sealed with courage. Sometimes the smallest voices, saying the right words at the right time, can echo louder than the greatest empires. The question now was whether that lesson would last or fade as memories grew distant and convenience once again trumped conscience. 1 year after the Battle of Kepler 442b, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of Humanity's Hope, the flagship of the Alliance of Conscience. Through the massive viewports, she could see a sight that would have been impossible to imagine just months earlier. Ships from over 50 different species moved in coordinated formations around the orbital station. Zephyrian war cruisers flew alongside crystalline research vessels. Aquatic exploration pods worked with human transport ships. The ethereal collective had even contributed their mysterious energy manipulators to the fleet. "Admiral," came a voice behind her. Chen turned to see Zaraka, the young crystalline who had become one of the Alliance's most effective recruitment officers. "We have another situation." Chen smiled at the term they had all learned to use. In the old galaxy, an extinction-level threat would have been called a strategic problem or acceptable losses. Now it was simply a situation that required immediate response. "Show me," Chen said as they walked toward the command center. The main display showed a star system on the outer rim. "The Gentle Builders," Zaraka explained. "They're a peaceful species that constructs living architecture. Their sun is going nova ahead of schedule. They have maybe 6 days before their entire solar system becomes uninhabitable." Dr. Wu, now serving as the Alliance's chief science coordinator, added more details. 20 million inhabitants across 3 worlds. They sent out a general distress call 18 hours ago. "And?" Chen asked, though she already knew the answer. "We have 47 ships volunteering for rescue duty," reported Commander Barnes, promoted to serve as Chen's operational coordinator. "The response time puts us as the first to volunteer, followed by the Zephyrians about 6 minutes later." Chen nodded, remembering when such a response would have taken weeks of political negotiations and cost-benefit analysis. "What about evacuation? Capacity?" "If we use every available ship, including civilian transports, we can evacuate everyone in 4 days," Dr. Wu replied. "The Gentle Builders have already started abandoning their outer colonies to concentrate on their homeworld." "Send the signal," Chen ordered. "All Alliance vessels. We have a situation requiring immediate humanitarian response." Within minutes, ships began breaking formation and jumping to hyperspace. The response was so automatic now that Chen barely had to give specific orders. Each species knew their role. Each ship understood the mission. Elder Zynthia's voice came over the communication system from her new position as the Alliance's diplomatic coordinator. "Sarah, the Gentle Builders are asking why we're helping them. Apparently they've never heard of humans before this week." Chen laughed. "Tell them the same thing we told you. We help because it's right." As the fleet jumped to hyperspace, Chen reflected on how much had changed. The Alliance of Conscience had started as a response to guilt, but it had evolved into something much more powerful, a new way of thinking about galactic civilization. The old system had been based on the idea that each species should look out for their own interests first. Trade agreements, military alliances, and diplomatic relations all served the goal of national advancement. Help was given only when it benefited the giver. The new system was built on the human doctrine, the radical idea that some things were more important than profit or politics. It wasn't naive idealism. The Alliance had learned to be practical about their interventions, but the default response to a call for help was no longer, "What do we gain?" but "How can we help?" The rescue of the Gentle Builders proceeded flawlessly. The Zephyrian ships handled the initial contact and system security. The crystalline vessels used their superior sensors to locate every settlement and refugee group. The aquatic ships proved perfect for evacuating the water-dwelling populations. Human transport vessels, built for long-range exploration, carried the largest number of evacuees. But the most important contribution came from the Thylorians. Their knowledge of agricultural systems allowed them to preserve seed banks and genetic samples from the Gentle Builders' famous living architecture. When the species eventually found a new home, they would be able to recreate their unique civilization. "No one left behind," Chen murmured as she watched the last transport ship clear the danger zone. It had become the Alliance's unofficial motto, borrowed from human military tradition. 3 days later, the evacuation was complete. 20 million Gentle Builders were safely aboard Alliance vessels, heading for temporary homes while scouts searched for a suitable new world. The Nova had begun, turning their ancient star into a brilliant funeral pyre. But something else happened during the rescue that surprised everyone. The Gentle Builders, grateful for their salvation, offered to share their architectural knowledge with the Alliance. Their living buildings could grow on almost any world, providing perfect housing that adapted to local conditions. "It's happening again," Dr. Wu told Chen as they watched the first experimental structures growing on Kepler 442b. "Every species we help ends up contributing something valuable to the Alliance. The galaxy is becoming more interconnected than ever before." Chen nodded. It was the opposite of what the old political systems had predicted. Instead of draining resources, helping others was creating new resources. The Alliance was becoming stronger with every rescue mission, not weaker. The true test came 6 months later when long-range sensors detected something that made every species shudder: another void swarm, larger than the one that had attacked. Kepler 442b. This time, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Every member of the Alliance contributed ships, weapons, and personnel. The combined fleet that assembled was the largest military force in galactic history, but the swarm never reached its intended target. Faced with organized resistance on a scale they had never encountered, the biomechanical creatures simply changed course and disappeared into the void between galaxies. "They're learning," Chen observed during the post-mission briefing. "The swarms can adapt, but so can we, and we adapt faster when we work together." Elder Xynthia, now showing her advanced age but still sharp as ever, smiled from her position at the conference table. "The humans taught us something that day on our world. They showed us that courage is contagious." The meeting was interrupted by an emergency communication from Earth. Admiral Harrison's face appeared on the main screen, but he was smiling. "Admiral Chen, I have news that I think you'll find interesting. The Earth government has just voted to formally join the Alliance of Conscience. Furthermore, humanity is officially adopting the human doctrine as our primary foreign policy." Chen felt a moment of satisfaction. Her homeworld had finally caught up with the lesson learned by her crew aboard the Defiant Hope. "There's more," Harrison continued. "We're establishing the Marcus Rodriguez Academy for Humanitarian Response. It will train officers from all Alliance species in rapid rescue operations. The first class starts next month." After the communication ended, Chen walked again to the observation deck. Outside, the mixed fleet was dispersing back to their home regions. But they would assemble again when needed, without question or delay. She thought about Marcus, about her crew, about the choice they had made in deep space over a year ago. They had set out to save 2 million Thylorians. Instead, they had saved something much larger: the galaxy's capacity for hope. A young human officer approached her. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, barely out of the academy, saluted smartly. "Admiral, incoming distress call from the Spiral Arm territories. A species called the Peaceful Swimmers is facing a plague outbreak." "Are we the closest responders?" Chen asked. "Yes, ma'am. We can be there in 2 days." Chen looked out at the stars where new civilizations were learning that they didn't have to face their problems alone. "Signal the fleet. We have a situation." As humanity's hope and its escort vessels jumped to hyperspace, the message spread across the galactic communication networks. Another species in need, another chance to prove that cooperation was stronger than selfishness. The galaxy had learned to answer distress calls with 2 simple words that had changed everything: "We will defend." On Earth, in a small garden behind a medical center, Maria Rodriguez tended to the Thylorian healing trees that now grew on dozens of worlds. The plants her father had died to protect were saving lives across the galaxy. just as his sacrifice had saved something even more precious, the idea that strangers were worth dying for. Above her, ships launched toward the stars, carrying that message to any species that needed to hear it. The galaxy was no longer a collection of competing civilizations. It had become something new, a community that had learned the most human lesson of all. When someone calls for help, you answer. No matter who they are, no matter what it costs, no matter how impossible the odds. Because in the end, the measure of a civilization isn't how much power it can gather, but how much of that power it's willing to sacrifice for others. The human doctrine had become galactic law, written not in treaties or constitutions but in the shared memory of a species that had proven that doing the right thing was always possible, even when it seemed impossible, especially then.